No one told me how hard this would be. By all accounts, I'm doing better than I ever have before. The job I want, doing things I like, working on projects I want to do. But there remains this void inside of me, a space that used to be filled by my anxieties that I have yet to replace. It was the motivating force that drove the very heart of who I was. It's a tool I lost as I got better. My anxieties disappeared, but so did that motivation. You spend so long living a certain way, walking down a narrow path, that you forget that there are other ways to exist. And so I'm left with a question that cuts to the very center of this road to recovery. What do I do now? Your Lie in April by Naoshi Arakawa was originally published in Monthly Shonen Magazine in April 2011, with an adaptation from A1 Pictures airing in October 2014. Kosei Arima is a piano prodigy, but after the death of his mother, he suffers a mental breakdown in the middle of a performance, leaving him unable to hear the notes he plays. After abandoning the piano for 2 years, he meets Kaori Miyazono, a free-spirited violinist, and the story follows as she slowly brings Kosei back into the world of music. There are some pieces of media that we encounter at exactly the right time, and for me, Your Lie in April was one of them. A romantic drama centered around something I love, music? That's right up my alley. I play piano, I'm classically trained, and at the time I watched it, I had just gone through a breakup with a violinist, so that was quite the timing. I'm not afraid to admit that this show ruined me. It pushed all the right buttons to hit me in the feels. I love this show. It's one of my favorites. Even if I do have some, let's call them wishes for the story. Not anything drastic like wishing the ending was any different. I think it's perfect as is, but more like, I wish these characters were older. My headcanon has them as high schoolers instead of middle schoolers. It's something that doesn't really change a whole lot about the story, and in reality, it's not really a big deal. Like I said, it's just a wish. But small gripes like that aside, I do think this is a very well-crafted romantic drama. Tragic in exactly the right way. That final performance? Absolute cinema. And that's one of the things I love about this show. Its depiction of performance. I wouldn't necessarily call them realistic. Performers don't have full-on conversations in their head while they play. At least I didn't. But there is something to that. Truth in spirit. When I did play, when I did perform, all I can remember are the pure emotions I was trying to convey. Less talking and more scenes, moods. What we don't think about, and this might surprise you, is that we don't think about our playing at all. In that performance mode, you don't think about playing specific notes. It's just something you feel, something you know after hours of practice. Most of the time, you don't really need the sheet music in front of you. It's sort of there as a just in case, or to reground yourself if you ever need it. At the point where you're performing at the level of someone like Kosei, you've memorized the entire repertoire. You are intimately familiar with the piece and all its nuances. So while having full-on conversations through the music you're playing is slightly exaggerated, that idea of trying to put out specific emotions, trying to project your internal world through your playing, is very much real. Specifically, I found how Emmy experiences music to be very realistic. She has an almost synesthetic experience of it. If you don't know, synesthesia is the intertwining of sensations. Some people can hear something and experience color or taste. This is beyond the typical association. It's a deeply integrated phenomenon. People with synesthesia can't help but tie one sense to another. It's automatic and involuntary. So when Emmy hears Kosei play and literally see colors in her mind's eye, that's a sort of synesthesia at play. While I don't have synesthesia myself, I do experience something similar which came about after years of playing. The tone of the piano brings to mind colors and experiences, warmth in orange and yellow hues, cold distance in vivid blues and whites, the velvet sound of a resonant viola or cello, that deep chocolate flavor. These are experiences I have when I hear music that are hard to describe in words, but in a show like this, they become much easier to understand. To me, music is much more than the transmission of sounds. It's a transmission of experiences from the performer to the audience. When I play, I'd imagine these scenes in my mind's eye and impart them through the music I produced. That question of, will it reach them, sat at the heart of what I did. I wasn't thinking about specific notes or the piece I played. I cared about portraying pure emotion and experience through the music I made. That's what I tried to do, of course. When you're playing, that's the only thing on your mind. But one of my favorite things the show does is a tiny little moment where Kosei listens back to his playing and is mortified. There's nothing quite like the horror of listening to a recording of yourself playing and experiencing a mismatch between what you hear and what you thought you sounded like. Things always sound so much better in your head than in reality. It's like listening to the sound of your own voice being played back. It's grating and embarrassing in a very particular kind of way. These are the experiences that I think the show portrays really well. It's true in spirit, a kind of fantasy grounded in something real. But the joys of performing aren't the only thing realistic about this show. I said earlier that when you play, you don't really think about what you're playing. You don't think about individual notes and sounds. It all flows from instinct and feeling at a certain point. And that's mostly true, but it isn't always. I think back to a time when I was first learning piano. I had a recital and had to play something simple, Bach's Minuet in G for those of you who know. It is by no means a complicated piece. It is very, very easy. I still have it memorized to this day. But the fact that it's easy to remember couldn't save me from the nerves I felt playing in front of a group of strangers for the first time. I remember sitting on that piano bench, playing what I know, but quietly in a panic. I was desperate to get through that moment. I thought about what I needed to play and how to play it so hard that all of a sudden, I completely forgot it all. The muscle memory I had built up all but vanished. The music that I could once hear in my head was gone. It's a phenomenon called Deautomatization, paralysis by analysis, when you concentrate so hard on what should be muscle memory that it suddenly disappears. Something that should be automatic becomes forced, a sudden shift in perspective, like bringing attention to the fact that your nose is always in your field of view. You automatically tune it out, but when someone brings it up, that's all you can see. The automatic process becomes manual, and it takes some time to remember how to forget. When Kosei loses the ability to hear his own playing, this is what I imagine going on in his head. He becomes so focused on the act of playing that his muscle memory fails him, and he's forced to painstakingly recall all the things he needs to do with his fingers. You can do that, of course, if you practice enough. You can remember individual actions your fingers need to perform, but when that happens, there's a very clear and sudden drop in the quality of your playing. I was able to get through my recital, but it was very clear in listening back that my playing suddenly felt forced and labored partway through. I lost the natural flow of the music. You could tell something was wrong, but from the perspective of the audience, your playing just starts to suck for no apparent reason. It all feels true to me, but I do think there's something here that goes beyond that feeling. What is the point of portraying something like this? What does it say about Kosei as a character in a narrative? As much as this is a story about music and performance, I think Kosei's journey is about redefining his connection to something he loves. Kosei's relationship to music is complicated. Dubbed the human metronome for his accuracy and precision, his playing came from a place of trauma and fear. The abuse from his mother, the pain of her death. That was the fuel that lit the fire of Kosei's playing. But what happens when you lose that fuel, when it all burns away? What are you left with? On one hand is the phenomenon of deautomatization, on the other is an engine without the spark to make itself move. The question that hangs over Kosei is one of recovery. Not how will he get through his trauma, but what comes next? And that is a much harder question to answer. What happens when you lose the tools that used to drive you? How can you rebuild? What do you do to learn to play again? I found this story at a particular time in my life. It resonated with me because of my circumstances, but I come back to it now with a completely different context. What I once saw as a story about overcoming is now one of persevering, the long and hard struggle that comes after the pain, rebuilding what was lost. From the outside, Kosei before his breakdown was doing fine. He was someone who could do incredible things but was burning up from the inside. And I know that struggle. It was one I lived through but never had the courage to name, something I tried to bury deep down and hide. I suffered from major depression, not in the casual sense but in a diagnosable way, and I lived with it for a very long time. And the thing about depression that some people don't realize is that it manifests itself differently in different people. For some, it keeps you in bed, a weight that pulls you down. But for me, it dragged me along, a motivation like no other. It was an anxiety that what I was doing wasn't enough, that I hadn't earned my place next to others. So I buried myself in things, pushed myself harder than anyone because I had something to prove. I was at war with myself. I'd skip out on meals because I thought I didn't deserve them. Work just a little harder to earn my rest. It wasn't enough to be me, I needed to be more. A fuel built on fear that burned fast and hot until it swallowed me whole. High functioning is what they would call me. And from the outside, it seemed like I was doing better than fine. I came off as motivated and disciplined like Kosei. But deep down, I was burning myself alive. Operating like that can only get you so far before it breaks. And like Kosei, I had a moment like that of my own. It was sudden and rapid, as if everything in my life suddenly came crashing down around me. A shock to the system that left me paralyzed and alone. People would ask me if I was alright, if there was anything they could do to help me get back to the place I was without realizing that where I was had caused me to break down in the first place. I'm in a much better place now. I'm on the road to recovery, but what no one told me was that recovery is a struggle all its own. I'm Kosei, relearning to play the piano, trying to feel my way through things I thought I loved. That motivation, that anxiety that used to drive me, a fuel I know now I can't let myself use. That's what I see in this story now, at this point in my life. A story of someone struggling to reconnect with parts of themselves. Kosei, once motivated by fear and trauma to the point of near perfection, breaks down suddenly and publicly, and through Kaori, has to relearn his relationship to who he is. His relationship to music, what he does when he plays now. How can he go on without the tools that once drove the very person he was? I can tell you now that it's hard relearning something that used to come so naturally. It's weird not being able to rely on the tools you used to before. My tools of anxiety and self-punishment? I'm in a place now where I know I can't use them, but when I reach into that toolbox for motivation, I come away empty-handed, questioning what I should do. There's a particular kind of danger in that for people like me, to see the ends before the means. Because there is the thought that if you could just go back to that place, burn that fuel, you can be a better version of yourself. Sometimes I think things would be easier if I got off my medication so that I could retreat back to that broken version of me. Because the hard truth is that he looked motivated and dedicated from the outside. A version of myself that seemed better than who I am now. Kosei was a brilliant pianist, able to play perfectly and without fault. A beautiful lie that denies the reality that deep down, that version of me was nothing but suffering. In the end, I couldn't see the value in what I was working towards because none of it mattered to me. Rose-tinted glasses that hide the bleak reality, the skipped meals, the relentless self-doubt, the unending punishment I put myself through, all those means to justify an end I couldn't even begin to see. What use is beautiful playing without the ability to hear it? Kosei's journey is one of relearning, relearning things that used to come so naturally to him. His muscle memory fails him. He can't rely on the tools he used to, so how does he move on to a more healthy mode of being? In Kaori, he sees a new way, one fueled by passion for music instead of the fear and trauma that drove him once before, with, behind it all, the temptation to go back to how things used to be. Because the easy path for Kosei is to latch his playing onto Kaori, go down that path once more, burn fast and bright before it comes crashing down again. Play for her sake, play for her health, so she gets better. For Kosei, that's a tempting place to be. But in my life now, that's a story I needed to hear. Not one about depression, but of what comes after. The pain and strife of recovery, because it's not as easy as they made it out to be. What I'm left with are questions. What do I have now in this vast wasteland I call a better self? How do I push myself to move on? That's the struggle I see in this show now, a show about persevering. And after rewatching, I'm reminded of just how much I love this show. Because what I see in it is my beautiful lie reflected back at me and exposed for what it is. An empty promise that doesn't lead me to the place I want to be. I feel more whole and complete than I ever have before. The therapy and medication help a lot. But there is a struggle in recovery. It's not such a straight line. It requires me to relearn things. Things that used to keep me motivated aren't there for me to rely on anymore, nor should they be things I rely on. The fear, anxiety, self-doubt, that fast-burning fuel. I'm learning to play the piano again, moving muscles I didn't know I still had. The question I have on this side of trauma is, what do I do now? I don't have an answer for that yet. I'm still navigating this new version of me. In his final performance, we see Kosei finally letting go of everything that used to hold him back, a pure expression of his love and freedom. I'm in the middle of a ballad all my own, finding my own way through. It's hard, but I know I want to be here, in this place, not where I used to be on the other side. Here I struggle and fight, but on terms of my own choosing, to find a means to an end that I can finally see. It isn't as easy as I thought. It's a tough piece to play, but I make my way through day by day. Not through each note, but through movements and phrases. I let the music flow naturally through me because that's how the music should move me. I'm not bound by individual fingerings and rules. I told myself a lie once, that my life was better at a time when it wasn't, that there was a point to the suffering that I just couldn't see, a siren's call. But now that I'm on the other side, I can tell that there's more to life than the suffering I felt. There wasn't any meaning in that suffering because suffering is all that it meant to me. I have the freedom to choose my path forward, playing music for my own sake, no one else's. I don't know exactly what to do now, but I know I can't go back. I won't let myself, because I won't be tempted by that lie anymore. I'll make it through this piece with care for myself because that's what I really need. A new way forward, one phrase at a time. Relearning everything precious to me. As always, thank you so much for watching. This turned out to be a deeply personal video for me, so I don't know if people can relate to it, but if it helps at least one person out there, that's enough for me. It's been on my mind for a while now, and this is a show I love, so it all works out. Thanks again to my patrons whose names you should see here, and if you want to support the channel too, you can do so for as little as $1. Due to popular demand, I'm also trying something new here and uploading directly to Spotify and Apple Music. Hopefully by the time you see this, the music for this video will be on there. I'll work on getting my back catalog up there as well. This is all new to me, so I'm still trying to figure stuff out. All that to say, look for me on Spotify and Apple Music. It's just another way to support the channel if you want. And keep an eye out on the community tab to see all those releases. But that's it from me. I'm already cooking next month's video, so look forward to that. Hopefully it does well considering what I want it to be about. You'll just have to subscribe to find out what it is. Like and comment while you're there if you want as well. But thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Shoots.